Jai Shri Krishna. Thank you, Nityanandaji, and thank you, Santoshi and Dr. Datta, for organizing this wonderful conference with some beautiful speakers. And I'm honored to be here to talk about the Bhagavad Gita. We'll just open with some shlokas, okay? Om Gangapataya Nama. Ya Kundentu Sarahara Davala, Ya Shubhra Vrasavruta, Ya Veena Varadanda Mandita Kara, Ya Shveta Padmasana, Ya Brahmachuta Shankara Prabhutipi, Devai Sata Vandita, Samam Patu Saraswati Bhagavati, Nishesha Jadyapaha, Shuklam Brahma Vichara Sara Paramam Adyam Jagat Vyapinim Veena Pustataririm Abhayadam Chandakara Paham Hastespata Malikam Vidatatim Padmasane Samsitam Vandetam Parameshwarim Bhagavatim Buddhipradam Sharatam Vasutam Vasutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramadanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Narayam Namaskutya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jaimudirayet Shantakaram Bhujikashenam Padmanabham Suresham Vishvadaram Gagana Sadrusham Megavandam Shubhangam Lakshmi Kantam Kamalanenam Yogi Vidyana Gamyam Vande Vishnu Bhavavayahara Savalokikanatham Om Shano Mitra Shamvarana Shano Bhavat Varyama Shano Indra Baraspati Shano Vishnu Rukma Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayu Tvameva Prataksham Brahmasi Tvameva Prataksham Brahma Vadishyami Rutam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanma Bhavatu Tadvakrama Bhavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram Om Shanti 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahe Tejasvi Navidi Mastu Madvidishyayahe Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Dear friends, when I was studying business studies at school, a certain phrase stood out to me throughout the course. And this phrase kept coming up again and again during my studies. The phrase was job satisfaction. Over the last few decades and years, I've accumulated a lot of knowledge and experience what that phrase really means. I've been through circumstances where I've experienced what happens when one doesn't have job satisfaction. I'm very grateful to the Lord because sometimes one's life is filled with occasions where one has to do activities that do not give one satisfaction and that feel meaningless. And I've spent years of my life in that way. And it's the Lord's eternal grace that over the last 10 or so years, I've been doing something which I desire to do from the inside. And I feel deep inside that, yes, this is where I belong and this is what I want to do. And if you get to do what you desire from within, then it's because of the Lord's great grace that you're able to do it. It gives me a unique sense of happiness that I've been given the right to be showered by the Lord's grace. The Lord's given me this opportunity to spread and promote these thoughts of the Gita. And I began this journey around 15 years before today. I studied and attended discourses of the Gita when I was 20 years of age, 25 years of age. Since then, the bond I formed with the Mother Gita has been getting stronger and stronger every day. To this date, I have not seen or experienced any ebb come into this relationship. Moreover, the spreading and promoting of the sacred thoughts of the Gita that this most sacred and pure work involves has enabled me to achieve unity with Bhagwan through the yogas. And I'm fortunate to attend a religious foundation as Pure as Sham. The word pure can be used on various occasions, but I always use the word pure when mentioning religious foundations. And the word pure is of great importance to me. So I received many requests to give talks on the Bhagavad Gita, but for me, they're not requests. Just like a child has been waiting for ages and you give the child something in its hand that makes it happy. In the same way, this is the activity that makes me happy. So when people say to me they're grateful for me to give these discourses, I tell them that you can be grateful to me for anything, but please don't be grateful to me for this, because I'm grateful to you for giving me the opportunity to do what I enjoy. The Bhagavad Gita is a very special scripture. Because of the Lord's grace, I've read the scriptures of all the religions, but the Bhagavad Gita is such a scripture that in such a small amount of words and in such an unfailing way describes the metaphysics of life. Warren Hastings described this scripture as a study of death and killing, and one that describes how one can win in life. Related to this, I am saying that I'm a warrior. I have great pleasure in saying this, and I have the full right to say this with great courage, that I am a warrior. I do not like to cry in life. I do not like to run away in life. I like to go to war. And whilst going to war in my life, whenever I faced troubling circumstances, I found inspiration in the Gita. My situation during these battles can be compared to a familiar situation when you watch films. One becomes so involved with the film that they put themselves in the shoes of one of the characters. For example, when you see women using up boxes and boxes of tissues crying over the plot of sad films because they're sad, they experience what it's like to be one of those poor characters. This is psychologically a very natural thing for a human being to do. In the same way, I imagined myself in a chariot going to war in the same position Arjun was in during the Mahabharata. And during the war of life, whenever I needed inspiration or willpower, I've seen myself standing in place of Arjun in the chariot. I thought that Lord Krishna is speaking to me instead of Arjun. And from this process, I've gained great strength. The strength and power I've gained by reflecting and meditating on the Mother Gita, which has grown over days, months, and years, I now wish to give you all. I never say that I'm knowledgeable, and I never say that I'm the rightful spokesperson of the Gita, and no one can say this. I've learnt the Gita from various great personalities. I've read, listened to, and thought about various versions of the Gita, and the prasad of this I wish to give to you. When one looks at society, one has two ways of measuring it. One way is a way of materiality, and the other is a way of spirituality. You can measure a person materially, and you can also measure them metaphysically or spiritually. When you use the way of materiality, you look at what one possesses, and this becomes important. Who has what? How big is his house? How many cars does he have? What is his business? How much is in his bank account? How much one possesses and what one has becomes important in materiality. But when you measure someone by the way of spirituality, what you have is not important, but who you are is important. As Stephen said, who are you? Who am I? Having does not become important, but being becomes important. And the realization and shape of being is wonderful. The problems and miseries of the modern age are mainly as a result, in my opinion, of the predominance of materiality and the forgetting of spirituality, because nowadays people are measured by what they have and not who they are. And every individual wants to prove himself in front of himself first, in front of his family second, in front of his society or group, for example, relatives, friends, acquaintances third, and finally in front of the world at large. Every person is trying to prove himself. And when each person tries to prove themselves, all they see is, and all they look for in another person is what that person has got. Sarve guna kanchan nashrante. When the only measure of a person is what he possesses, and everyone is trying to prove themselves, there is only one road left to take. I'll keep gathering what I can. Then the world will respect me. Then the world will adore me, which I'm looking for in other people. When we talk nowadays of materiality and ask what it is, it's nothing else than everyone trying to prove that there's something. And because they have to gather things to prove there's something, they gather those things. They run after objects. The person running after the objects knows there's nothing in those objects. I see owners of various objects in front of me. There are many kinds of things. And I meet people who have piles and piles of things, yet within there is something empty. There's always something missing in their lives. Then why run after these things? Moreover, once you find out there's nothing in those objects, why do they still run after these things? One of the effects of running after objects is that one is not running for himself, but for other people. Once you have an affluence of objects, one of the effects is that they become worthless. When you have 10 cars in the garage and the 11th car comes, then it hardly makes a difference. No one in a house even knows that another car has come. No one knows for 15 or 10 days. And when the daughter of the house goes to college and goes to find a car, then she will ask the driver if there's a new car. This is affluence. Why do people still run for objects? They're not running for themselves, but for other people. And after running for other people, they just become emptier and emptier. And in their heart, there is a feeling of deep sadness. This is the problem of the modern age. This was the problem at the end of the 20th century, and this is the problem at the beginning of the 21st century. Why is the Gita necessary today? Because a few years back, people decided that if we gather these things, we'll be happy, but now they have those things, and yet there's still a deficiency. When one is sad because they don't have the objects they desire, it's a very shallow unhappiness. They're without possessions. But when they are sad, when they have those possessions, then their sadness is very deep. When one is sad because they're hungry, then once you hand them two chapatis, the sadness goes away. But what about the sadness when one's stomach is filled? This sadness is a very deep sadness. Today, fast progress has been beneficial in many ways and has benefited everyone. 50 years ago, happiness was not as easily available as this. Life was very problematic. In between all these happy moments, what will I do when I'm sad? There is an ocean of happiness nowadays, and the island on which a person is sitting is one of sadness. And every now and then, one has to come back to the island. When you go to swim in the ocean, you may swim for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, but you have to come back to the island. You cannot keep swimming in the ocean because you're a person, not a fish. And whenever a person comes back to the island after swimming in the ocean, the fury of that sadness becomes unbearable. Until now, society has been described by economists as a split between haves and have-nots. I want to describe a third type of person, have-nots in spite of being haves. They have everything, and yet they still have an experience of not having. And this sadness is a major sadness of today. What will the Gita have to say about this major sadness of today? How will Sri Krishna be able to help with this major sadness? With that vision in mind and with the challenges of modern life, we will study the Gita. And only then is the Gita useful. Otherwise, we just have the 5 Pandavas, and one of these 5 Pandavas, Arjuna, is standing on a battlefield of Kurukshetra. He doesn't want to fight, and Sri Krishna tells him to fight. What has that got to do with you or me? The war happened and the Pandavas won. Everything was finished. It all worked out well in the end. Now what? It has no value other than a story. Then why has it remained a major scripture for thousands and thousands of years? There is only one reason. Sambhavami yuge yuge. Shri Krishna says in the 4th chapter of the Gita, I come into being from age to age. This is my vision of the meaning of the Gita because it applies to every battle. Arjuna did not know at the time that 5,000 years later, the words Shri Krishna said to him would be meaningful to help us in this respect. But Lord Krishna knew, and that is why Shri Krishna said, Sambhavami yuge yuge. It has always been the case that in different eras, the different meanings that the Gita had for different people has always made the listener or reader feel as if the Gita is for them. Only Shri Krishna knew this. Only Shri Krishna knew that the Gita is a contemporary scripture. It has always been a contemporary scripture. We're going to pay our respects to such a Gita. The bond we have lost with the Supreme Being, Shri Krishna and spirituality, this we're going to attempt to fully reestablish once again. And we're going to do this with the words of the Supreme Being himself, the words of Bhagwan himself. In today's times, machines have developed and appreciated, but human beings have depreciated. We want to go through this journey of Gita from a practical perspective. We don't want to just study the scripture, get up and brush our clothes clean. I am always bold, me, the layman, and in fact, anyone, whoever wants to read the Gita, get up and brush their clothes clean, is probably going to be disappointed. And it's good they'll be disappointed. I don't recommend that people who want to read, get up and just brush their clothes clean should read this book. For those who want to gain something from the scripture, for those who want to gain something from the words of Shri Krishna, and for those who want to take their lives towards the right direction, towards sattva, as Stephen said, I'll try with the blessings of Shri Krishna to make sure those people don't go back empty-handed. I'm just going to share, with the limitations of time, some shlokas from chapter 2, since Stephen mentioned chapter 2. I'll pick that. And
you have five more minutes.
Okay. So, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Asochan Anavashyam Tvam Prajna Vadam Shabashate Gatasun Cha Na Anushanti Pandita. Shri Krishna said, you grieve for those who you should not grieve for, yet you speak words about wisdom. Wise men do not grieve for the dead or the living. In this and the next 19 verses, Shri Krishna breaks all the theories down into comprehensive terms to explain them to Arjuna. Samkhya theory looks at everything and takes knowledge from all the directions. It's based on logic. Arjun was using logical arguments not to fight, and the Lord has to use logic to explain it to him. If Arjun was using emotional arguments, then the Lord would have to show him the way of bhakti first. Because Arjun was talking about intellectual matters, Shri Krishna proved him wrong with the sword of logic. That is why Shri Krishna begins by explaining Samkhya theory. Shri Krishna explains why he was smiling in this work, because Arjun was making big talk like a knowledgeable person, but he forgot the important fact that a knowledgeable person does not grieve for the dead. So it's very, very important. Shri Krishna describes these two words, gatasun and agatasun. Samkhya theorists do not use the words living or dead, but they use the words gatasun and agatasun. Asu means the body. So gatasun is someone whose life is gone, who in common language we refer to dead, even though Samkhya theorists would never use this word. The person never goes because the person is the Atma, not the soul, the Atma, and not the life. The Atma never dies and is only the life that goes. Agatasun means someone whose life is not gone or living in common language. So Samkhya theorists say that people are either gatasun or agatasun. We're agatasun because our lives are with us, and a time will come when we're gatasun. We will not die, only our bodies go away. So it's never a question of whether we're the Atma or not, but the question of whether we have lives or not. So who are we? What is the difference between gatasun and agatasun? What is left when our lives go? Let's understand. Let's make a list. Imagine there's a big palace in which a king lives. What would be the difference between gatasun and agatasun? Let's state the obvious. There's a palace, and in that palace is a king's room. In there is the Atma, the intellect, and the subconscious mind in that palace. The Atma is the king, the intellect is the king's wife, the queen, and the subconscious mind is the prime minister. This is the inner chamber. This does not change whether there's gatasun or agatasun. They will be in the same state and won't be affected by this. Let's put an A next to the Atma, and you combine the intellect and the subconscious mind into one group under B. There'll always be the Atma. Then we have the conscious mind, which we call the deputy prime minister under C. After that, we have the prana, the life, which is the security guard and protector, which is D. And even after, we have the senses and the bodies, which we put under E, which are always together in the majority of cases. The senses are the servants, and the body is a head servant that mix and work together. So you can't have the arm or eyes functioning on their own. You need something that joins them up. So without the head servant, the 10 servants will all work in the bathroom. So the main, the body attributes this tasks to the servants. Finally, we have the world in which these things live and do their work. This is the palace, F. So if A, the Atma, B, the intellect and subconscious mind, the queen and prime minister, C, conscious mind, deputy prime minister, D, life, security guard, E, senses, the servants, and the body, the head servant, F, the world, the palace. When life comes, we are gatasus. So C, D, E, and F are there, and the conscious mind, life, senses, and body, and world work together in accordance with the context they're put. But when the life goes, then the conscious mind, the life, senses, and body, and the world all go. Because life goes away, the world goes away. The only reason why the world exists is because we're living. When we're agatasun, then the Atma, the intellect, and the subconscious mind stay as they are. The subconscious mind never leaves the imprints it's gathered and takes them with it. These three things are not affected. And Shri Krishna is trying to say that the wise people know they are the Atma. They know they are the king. The king is sitting in his room, and it doesn't matter to him who has been stationed outside as a security guard. Everything is assigned. Whether the security guard changes, comes, doesn't come, it doesn't affect the king. The king does not get happy or grieved. He is not affected. In the same way, it doesn't matter to the
complete
Atma.
in 1 more minute.
Okay, fine. It doesn't matter to the Atma whether life goes, doesn't go, or takes another body. He is unattached. He who knows this is a pandita, a wise person. You are the Atma. So I'll finish on that note, and I'll bow down to the Bhagavad Gita. And thank you very much for this invitation.